For nearly 50 years, it defined distance, comfort, and class. But now the Goldwing is gone. No tribute, no announcement, just a quiet disappearance. Honda didn't just retire a motorcycle, they ended an era. And what I tell you at the end of the video could leave the entire touring market shaken. The death nobody mourned. Some motorcycles go out with a bang. They break sales records, get farewell tours, and leave behind a trail of die-hard fans begging for just one more year of production. The Honda Goldwing did none of those things. It simply vanished. Not with outrage, not with headlines, not even with reverence. Instead, it faded into the background of a world that no longer had a place for it. One day it was there, massive and majestic, and the next, nothing but silence. For a motorcycle that defined luxury touring for over 4 decades, its quiet demise says more about the changing world of motorcycles than about the machine itself. This wasn't just the end of a product line, it was the end of an era. The Goldwing had once been the motorcycle equivalent of a grand piano, elegant, heavy, and requiring space to appreciate it. It represented a kind of long-distance freedom few machines could match. Riders would set out across states, even across the country, with nothing but the road and the whisper-quiet hum of its flat-six engine beneath them. And yet, when that sound finally stopped, there were no protests, no petitions, just acceptance. There is a strange sadness in that kind of ending. The Goldwing was not killed by scandal, failure, or bad engineering. It was killed by a world that had already moved on. Its death wasn't a dramatic crash. It was a long exhale that no one realized was its last. The Goldwing simply didn't catch up in time. But that wasn't the only reason it faded, because perfection can be its own kind of poison. Tell us what you ride and where you take it in the comments. We'd love to see what you're driving. If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Too perfect to survive. For decades, the Goldwing was the engineering marvel of the motorcycle world. Honda poured everything into it. It was quiet, balanced, precise, and equipped with more luxury features than some cars. But in chasing perfection, something got lost. Character. The very thing that draws riders in, the vibration in your spine, the slight imperfection in every corner, the mechanical rawness of the road, was gone. The Goldwing didn't evolve into a better bike. It evolved into something that didn't feel like a bike at all. It became a machine for people who didn't want to be surprised, who valued predictability over personality. It did everything so well that it became unrelatable. Riders didn't feel like they were mastering it. They felt like they were riding in a high-end simulator. In its final generation, the Goldwing was lighter and sleeker with dual-clutch technology, Apple CarPlay, and electronically adjustable suspension. But these features, however advanced, pushed it further away from its roots. It wasn't a bike you fell in love with. It was a bike you respected from a distance. Too expensive to crash, too refined to modify, too complete to bond with. Eventually, people stopped dreaming about it, because dreaming about motorcycles has never been about perfection. It's about connection. And the Goldwing, for all its excellence, stopped giving riders a reason to connect. Still, there might have been hope if a new generation had picked it up and carried the legacy forward. But that never happened. Need solid gear without the showroom markup? Our favorite picks are right below in the description. Grab what fits your ride. A bike without a generation. The Honda Goldwing didn't just lose its old fans, it failed to make new ones. For younger riders, the bike represented a bygone era they never experienced. It was their father's or grandfather's dream, a luxury liner on 2 wheels built for long-haul travel in a world that increasingly values short attention spans and instant gratification. This wasn't simply about marketing, it was about identity. New riders were drawn to machines that felt agile, rebellious, or expressive. The Goldwing, meanwhile, became associated with retirees, highway commutes, and an outdated sense of freedom. Its strengths, comfort, stability, quiet performance, weren't just ignored, they were actively rejected. Honda made efforts to modernize it, but the changes came too late, and without the cultural spark needed to ignite a new generation of interest. There was no grassroots revival, no cult following, no movement to bring it back. It simply drifted out of relevance, bypassed by a marketplace that was looking elsewhere. And that's the most haunting part of this story. The Goldwing didn't just die, it became invisible, not hated, not forgotten, just irrelevant. It was the end of the road for a machine that once defined what touring could be. Yet its disappearance set off ripple effects across the entire industry, because the fall of a giant always leaves a vacuum, and others were already racing to fill it. The luxury trap. The Goldwing was once a symbol of unmatched comfort and technological superiority, but somewhere between innovation and excess, Honda lost the plot. In a world tightening its belts, the Goldwing became a luxury that fewer riders could afford or even justify. What used to be aspirational began to feel burdensome. Priced well over $30,000 in many configurations, it no longer symbolized achievement. It symbolized disconnection. The reality was stark. Riders who once dreamed of the Goldwing were now dreaming smaller. Middle-class incomes hadn't kept pace with rising motorcycle costs, and with inflation eating into discretionary spending, even lifelong Honda fans began re-evaluating their priorities. Touring no longer required a spaceship. More riders were opting for stripped-down cruisers, budget-friendly adventure bikes, or mid-sized tourers with fewer buttons and more soul. The Wing, once a destination, was now a detour no one was taking. Even worse, the complexity of the Goldwing's onboard systems, ranging from full infotainment suites to lane-aware features and ride-by-wire tech, alienated riders who valued simplicity. Maintenance costs soared. The learning curve steepened. The idea of jumping on a Goldwing for a simple ride started to feel like a contradiction. And as the Wing's weight climbed and its software stack grew, its audience shrank. Luxury had become the trap, not because it was bad, but because it no longer fit the world it was riding through. But while Honda was quietly sinking into high-tech silence, Harley-Davidson did something else entirely. Harley stayed loud. Honda went quiet. If the Goldwing was the gentleman's motorcycle, Harley was the rebel's anthem, and that distinction made all the difference. As Honda refined every system, polished every corner, and perfected every ride, they also eliminated the grip, the very quality that connects rider to machine. Harley, for all its flaws, never gave up the roar. And in an industry increasingly sterilized by regulation and silicon, that roar still mattered. Honda's approach to brand identity was clean, quiet, and respectful. But motorcycles aren't always about respect. They're about presence. They're about being seen, being heard, and being felt. Harley's bikes, even the entry-level models, announce themselves before they enter a parking lot. The Goldwing, for all its luxury, could glide past unnoticed. And in a market where visibility is part of value, that invisibility was fatal. Even in rider communities, this divergence was palpable. Honda owners would quietly nod, Harley owners would talk for hours. While Honda focused on efficiency and ergonomics, Harley doubled down on sound, weight, chrome, and character. Riders didn't just ride Harleys, they belonged to something. That tribal energy, loud, messy, and fiercely loyal, was never engineered into a Goldwing, and Honda never figured out how to bottle it. The silence wasn't golden, it was ghostly. And as younger generations entered the market craving identity and experience, they weren't looking for quiet excellence. They were looking for something raw. Honda tried to evolve to match that desire, but in doing so, they made a critical mistake: the evolution that erased the Wing. Innovation can save a product or erase it, and in the case of the Goldwing, Honda's design overhaul didn't elevate the brand. It buried it. The switch from the classic, bulky touring style to the sleeker, sharper, coupe-like silhouette stripped away the very visual power that defined it for decades. In trying to win over a new audience, Honda lost its old one and failed to gain the new. Gone were the iconic saddlebag lines, the distinctive boxy fairing, the sense of riding something unmistakably grand. In its place was a sleeker, tech-laden bike that looked like it belonged more in a lab than on an open road. Yes, it was faster. Yes, it handled better, but it no longer looked or felt like a Goldwing. It looked like something trying not to be what it was. The engine layout changed. The seating position tightened. Even the dash went fully digital, abandoning the tactile feel of old-school buttons and analog gauges. Riders who had stayed with the Wing for decades suddenly felt like strangers on their own machines. And new riders? They didn't recognize it or care. In marketing materials, Honda touted the new Wing as future-forward and streamlined for modern touring. But in real conversations, longtime riders said the quiet part out loud. It's not a Goldwing anymore. Honda had intended a rebirth. What they delivered was an elegant erasure, and for many dealers watching this unfold, the signals were clear. The death of dealer faith. In the end, it wasn't the engineering or the economy that dealt the final blow, It was the dealers, and they saw it coming before anyone else. Across the United States, Honda showrooms began quietly reducing their Goldwing allocations, not because they disliked the bike, but because customers simply weren't walking in asking for it anymore. For years, the Goldwing had been a pillar in the back corner of dealerships, a crown jewel, always polished, rarely test-ridden. But as foot traffic shifted toward adventure bikes, entry-level commuters, and even retro-style machines, the Wing became a showroom ghost. Sales reps stopped pushing it, not out of malice but out of exhaustion. Selling a $30,000 tourer to a generation glued to YouTube reviews and minimalist design was like selling a grand piano to someone shopping for earbuds. Even veteran Honda reps admitted, off the record, that the Wing had become a legacy product, kept around more out of respect than demand. And in many cases, rival brands filled the void before Honda could even respond. Indian dealerships in particular began snatching up disillusioned Goldwing loyalists with models like the Pursuit and Challenger, bikes that looked, felt, and sounded like purpose-built tourers without the identity crisis. When dealers lose faith, they stop fighting for shelf space. And when that happens, it's only a matter of time before corporate follows. But this wasn't just a retail failure, it was a cultural withdrawal. And in the next phase of this story, the industry would start imitating a bike already fading into memory. The DCT Divide. It was supposed to be revolutionary. Honda's dual-clutch transmission promised flawless shifting, lightning-fast gear changes, and a smoother ride than anything that came before. On paper, it worked flawlessly. Riders no longer had to worry about stalling in traffic, managing a clutch in the rain, or fumbling on a steep incline. The Goldwing became the smoothest, smartest cruiser on the planet. But that's where the problem started. Because for many longtime riders, the DCT wasn't innovation. It was intrusion. For every rider who embraced the convenience, there was another who felt like something essential had been stripped away. The simple satisfaction of pulling in a clutch lever, the rhythmic tap of shifting gears, the subtle communication between rider and machine, that was gone. In its place was a digital override that made decisions for you. The bike didn't ask, it just acted. And for traditionalists, that felt like a betrayal. The split was immediate. Younger or less experienced riders were intrigued, but older riders, the very people who built the Goldwing's legacy, felt alienated. It didn't matter how well the system worked. It didn't matter that Formula One teams had used similar tech for decades. What mattered was that the ride no longer felt earned. It was optimized, yes, but sterile, precise, but numb. And in that subtle but powerful shift, something was lost. The Goldwing no longer invited you to ride it. It invited you to manage it. And that one change split the audience clean in half. But the DCT was only the beginning, because just as the bike was learning to shift for you, it also started thinking for you, and that's when everything changed. Technology without soul. By the time the 2018 Goldwing hit showrooms, it had become something of a marvel. Ride modes, traction control, cornering ABS, GPS integration, Apple CarPlay, a 7-inch TFT display that looked more at home in a Tesla than a motorcycle. Honda had built a touring spaceship. It was flawless. It was fast. It was smarter than anything else on the road, but ask any rider who sat on it, and many will tell you the same thing. It didn't feel like anything. Because all the technology in the world couldn't replicate the one thing that made the original Goldwing legendary: soul. The deep, mechanical thrum, the visceral feedback in every corner, the sense that you were mastering something powerful, something raw. In the newer models, those elements were replaced with sensors, settings, and software. There were so many toggles and menus that you needed a tutorial just to start the ride. Older riders called it clinical, others called it overkill, but no one called it fun. You couldn't feel the road through a screen. You couldn't bond with your machine through a menu. The Goldwing had been turned into a machine for managing systems, not for chasing freedom. And in that transformation, it lost the very magic that made people fall in love with riding in the first place. Even Honda loyalists began quietly drifting away. They didn't sell their bikes, they just stopped recommending them. And in a market where word of mouth still means everything, that silence was deafening. But while Honda was perfecting screens and systems, another company was quietly reclaiming the very crown Honda had just abandoned. Indian took its crown. While Honda leaned into refinement, Indian leaned into identity. With the launch of the Challenger and later the Pursuit, Indian Motorcycle didn't just build a competitor, they built a spiritual successor to everything the Goldwing used to represent. Big engines, commanding presence, comfort without compromise. But more importantly, Indian kept what Honda abandoned: character. The Power Plus engine didn't whisper. It roared. The controls felt direct. The handling was confident without feeling numb. And the styling? It looked like something designed for the open road, not a showroom display. Riders who test rode both bikes often describe the Indian as alive and the Honda as calculated. That distinction wasn't just about performance, it was emotional. Indian knew who they were building for. They weren't chasing everyone, they were targeting the riders Honda had left behind. The long haulers, the lifers, the ones who still believed a motorcycle should talk back when you twist the throttle. And slowly, those riders began to trade in their wings for something that reminded them why they fell in love with motorcycling in the first place. By 2022, Indian's momentum was undeniable. They were pulling younger buyers while still respecting older ones. Honda, meanwhile, was caught between two worlds. Too tech-heavy for purists, too conservative for millennials. The Goldwing was left straddling a divide while Indian walked away with the throne. But for all the talk of features and feel, one Final Dagger finished the Goldwing off. And it came not from a showroom, but from a spreadsheet. A price tag without pride. At some point, the math just stopped working. The latest Goldwing models pushed past $30,000, and that was before taxes, accessories, and dealer markups. For many buyers, that number wasn't just high, it was unjustifiable, because it wasn't just about the price, it was about what you felt when you looked at the bike and asked yourself, is this worth it? In earlier decades, the answer would have been a confident yes. You weren't just buying a motorcycle, you were buying an identity, a legacy, a dream. But now, that dream came loaded with digital bloat, alienating tech, and a ride experience that felt more like operating a system than riding a bike. That emotional bond, the pride of ownership, was gone. And once that pride disappeared, the value collapsed. The resale market softened. Dealerships started offering quiet incentives. Longtime riders began looking at used Harleys or switching brands altogether. Even those who could afford the new Goldwing began hesitating. The equation no longer balanced. The bike had become a luxury product without the emotional luxury to match. It was a staggering fall. From the most respected touring platform in the world to a misunderstood, overpriced machine that couldn't find its place. And in today's market, where buyers are sharper and options are plentiful, being merely technically excellent isn't enough. And so the Goldwing didn't just lose sales, it lost meaning. And once that happens, no price can save you. Because when your rivals steal your riders, your tech alienates your base, and your price tag stops sparking pride, what you're left with isn't a legacy. The Copycat Crisis. The Goldwing's retreat didn't leave a vacuum, it triggered a gold rush. As soon as word spread that Honda was scaling back its legendary touring line, competitors wasted no time. Yamaha revived its transcontinental development teams. Suzuki dusted off blueprints it had shelved for over a decade. Even BMW and Ducati began fast-tracking grand touring prototypes, many of which now feature DCT-style transmission systems eerily similar to Honda's. These moves weren't innovation, they were imitation, but the irony is hard to ignore. These manufacturers are chasing a shadow. The Goldwing was not just a motorcycle, it was a benchmark. Its decades of refinement, balance, and quiet sophistication had already changed what riders expect from a long-distance machine. So when rivals tried to build their own versions, they weren't early. They were decades late. Yet in the scramble to fill the void, they've learned a brutal truth. Replicating Honda's engineering is one thing. Capturing its spirit is another. The Goldwing wasn't successful because it had tech. It was successful because it had trust. Riders believed in it. That's not something you can copy into a spec sheet. But the strategic irony deepens when you look at what's next. These brands are pouring resources into platforms that Honda just walked away from. They're building answers to a question riders may have stopped asking. And that reveals something deeper. Because they weren't just late, they were chasing a bike that already changed everything. Meanwhile, not all the ripple effects were mechanical. Some of them were human, and they were unfolding quietly in union halls across the country. Labor's quiet pivot. While the headlines focused on tech, labor unions were watching something else: Honda's strategy. Unlike Harley-Davidson, which spent decades offshoring and downsizing American plants, Honda managed to maintain a lean but committed American footprint. The Goldwing was never a mass-production cash grab. It was a labor-intensive flagship that gave pride to the workers who built it in Marysville, Ohio. But when Honda quietly pulled the plug, something shifted. Union leaders began to whisper the unthinkable. What if brand loyalty was no longer a guarantee of job security? For decades, the assumption was clear. Harley protected its image, and unions protected their workers. But that contract was never written in ink. It was built on trust, and trust is now fragile. In Honda's case, pulling the Goldwing didn't mean shuttering every factory, but it did mean reevaluating the role of high-effort, low-volume builds in a high-cost labor market. Workers knew this. And as they watched Harley double down on overseas expansion and saw Goldwing production quietly disappear, the conclusion became hard to ignore. There is now a quiet pivot happening. Labor leaders are no longer fighting to keep legends alive. They're fighting to secure relevance in a world that no longer values motorcycle heritage the same way. The question isn't just, what do we build? It's becoming, why would they build it here? And the question lingering in union halls, what if loyalty no longer protects you? But beyond the shop floor and the supply chains, the message was loudest in a place that doesn't care about sentiment, only results. Feeling the impact of Honda's decision? Like if you're still processing the loss of such an iconic machine, and comment below to share your favorite Goldwing memory or what you'd like to see next in the touring world. The market sends a message. Wall Street didn't flinch when the Goldwing faded. It nodded. Because to investors, Honda's decision wasn't cowardice. It was precision. Analysts praised the company's ability to sunset a legacy product without dragging down margin. Quiet efficiency isn't sexy, but it performed. And when you're running multi-billion-dollar portfolios, performance matters more than nostalgia. Contrast that with Harley-Davidson. As Honda pulled away from an aging segment, Harley doubled down. It introduced overly stylized touring bikes packed with outdated tech and rising price tags. Investors noticed. So did the market. Harley's stock plateaued. Dealer inventories ballooned. Financing companies began tightening their terms. And for the first time in decades, Harley was no longer seen as untouchable. It was seen as vulnerable. Meanwhile, retailers responded in their own way. Goldwing floor models disappeared with quiet finality. Indian's Pursuit and Yamaha's Star Venture took over premium showroom space. Customers no longer asked for the Honda. They asked what else could tour like it, but weigh less, cost less, and feel more personal. The Goldwing didn't lose, it exited. And the market rewarded that decision with something rarer than applause: confidence. Because when Honda walked away, it wasn't backing down. It was making room to build something that mattered more. Something forward-looking. Wall Street doesn't care about nostalgia, it cares about execution. And that's the truth at the heart of this entire moment. Because this was never just about one bike, and the silence it left behind tells us exactly why. This was never just about one bike. The Honda Goldwing wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol of ambition, of refinement, of everything the motorcycle industry used to dream about. But its quiet retirement exposed a larger reality, that the road has changed and the riders have changed with it. What died with the Goldwing wasn't just a model. It was a philosophy, the idea that motorcycles should be as smooth as cars, as durable as tanks, and as polite as butlers. It was a beautiful vision, but it no longer belonged to this generation. Today's riders want emotion, simplicity, customization. They don't want a living room on two wheels, they want a pulse. In that sense, the Goldwing didn't lose to Indian or Yamaha or Harley, it lost to time. It lost to culture. It lost to an era where big, beautiful, expensive things no longer carry meaning. They carry burdens. The death of the Goldwing marks the end of an age when engineers led the brand and riders followed them with reverence. That age is gone. And so the question isn't what replaces the Goldwing, The question is, what replaces the mindset that created it? The answer might not be another touring bike, it might be nothing at all, because sometimes history doesn't get rewritten. As the Honda Goldwing fades into history, it's a reminder that even the most iconic machines can be left behind as the world moves forward. What do you think about its quiet retirement? Like this video if you've been a fan of the Goldwing, or if you think it's time for something new, and comment below with your thoughts on the future of touring bikes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more in-depth looks at the bikes shaping the future.